Today's video is brought to you by Hardwood Amino, a mobile social network built solely for basketball fans. It's the largest growing NBA community in the world. There are over 60,000 members to meet and interact with, sort of like a NBA Discord and Reddit crossover, daily public chat rooms to debate and discuss relevant issues, even create your own topic and have others join in on the conversation. You can participate in polls, take quizzes to test your knowledge of the game, read or even create your own content and blog posts for the community. It's available for both iOS and Android, and if you do want to download it and try it out, go ahead and follow me on there as well. Alright then, let's hop right into the video. When people try to describe the rise of the Golden State Warriors, try to retrace the steps taken in reverse, the right turns made at the right times that led them to the perfect road taken, the highway if you will, an exclusive hidden path that leads you through a forest of mediocrity, less than mediocrity, the bottom-feeding laughingstock that they were, the 15-year All-Star drought, the near 20-year playoff drought. Throughout the 18-year span from 94 to 2012, the franchise only enjoyed a single playoff appearance. In the near magical, we believe, branded 07 postseason.
That building was as loud as I've ever heard it. People were so happy to see the Warriors become a factor. It was really a movement at that time.
We need to win, I think maybe 17 games to get ourselves in position for a playoff with a run. And I'll never forget Matt Barnes, Baron Davis, and Steven Jackson. They were at the back of the plane talking about what they need to do to try and make this run.
We had to really scratch and claw to get ourselves in the playoffs, and we instantly all became family. It was just a band of brothers on and off the court.
They pulled themselves together, pulled the team together, and we went on this incredible run to get into the position to make the 8th spot and then eventually shock the world.
In which they upset the #1 seed Dallas Mavericks with a league-leading 67-win record. The 8th seed Golden State Warriors, who didn't even have a guaranteed playoff spot until the very final game of the season.
Left for dead at 26-35. They finished 16-5 to end the year. And Warrior fans, your long shot has come home. It's playoff time.
They waited a long time.
Don Nelson's in the middle of all of it. We believe sides, this team believes. 4,000 at Oracle Arena.
And there's 4,000 people right now at Oracle Arena who watch this game. You got anything to say to them?
Hey, Warriors, baby, it's over. The playoff is over. I told y'all last year. I promised y'all last year, the last game that we was gonna make. It's over.
And thus was born the legacy of the Golden State Warriors today. The atmosphere stayed the same as they began their current playoff streak in 2013. We believe, and trust me, they believed, and it didn't take long for the rest of the NBA world to believe too. The first round that postseason, Steph showed off his newest perfected offensive weapon to the world, inexplicably hitting high-arcing floater after high-arcing floater. Didn't matter where he was on the floor, near the top of the key, falling away from the basket, still getting it up, underhanded, flipping the ball up and over outstretched arms, humiliating Denver's lengthy defenders. And Andrew Bogut was abusing the same defense right at the rim. The ball was moving, the offense flowing like a well-oiled machine, every role player playing their part perfectly. And everybody watching knew for certain this was not a fluke. This team was for real, a playoff threat for years to come. On to round 2, their first test facing off against a true contender, a San Antonio group whose only separation from a championship that very season was a single Ray Allen 3. But the 4-2 series result doesn't nearly tell the whole story. Off an extremely motivating series win against Denver, Golden State came out the gates ready to prove they belonged in the same breath as the Spurs. They themselves were a single Manu game winner away from stealing both games on the Spurs' own court, leaving them up 2-0 with 2 consecutive games in Oakland looming, and a real shot at putting the whole thing away at once. In that series, Steph picked the ball up from the floor and immediately rose up to hit a deep 2. He hit a runner from well behind the three-point arc off 1 foot, and the rest was history. The world knew they weren't just a simple playoff threat. They could compete with the best of them. Looking back on it all now, you can see how damn close they really were. A couple more bounces went their way, and they could have easily taken San Antonio's place, competing on the biggest stage in basketball for a world title that first postseason. So in retrospect, after all that's happened in the 5 years between then and now, when people try to account for the exact moves behind this almost miraculous run of prosperity that seemingly came out of nowhere, most prefer to take the cop-out. The most basic one-word explanation: luck. It's not that it isn't true that there was plenty of luck in the mix. Any achievements this paramount, they're going to take a certain amount of luck. But to label it as a leading component in their whole formula is taking the easy way out, because people don't want to know the entire stories. All the details lost in the midst, all the connected moves where one success led to another, which led to another. No, people just want a clear, concise answer to pinpoint the one exact specific moment that changed the entire direction of the franchise. And you know what? F it, I'll give them what they want, because there was in fact one defining moment. Halloween Day 2012, Golden State inked what was known as an extremely dangerous 4-year deal with Steph Curry. On average, it was worth about $11 million annually. Without this deal, Kevin Durant would have never happened. Andre Iguodala wouldn't even have happened. You want to pinpoint one game-changing moment, one definitive turning point? This is about as close as you can get. Those 2013 playoffs I was speaking on, those were, of course, after Steph had inked this deal, but the franchise still enjoyed that breakout year while he was still under his rookie contract, getting paid less than $4 million that season, while he was doing things like this in the postseason against the very team that made it out the West. The deal was a major risk, but the payoff was more tremendous than anyone could have anticipated. This result went far further than anybody's craziest, most ambitious imaginations. In hindsight, the deal looks like one of the best bargains in sports history. In reality, when you look at all the disastrous events leading up to it, the concerns are exceedingly apparent. Keep in mind, Steph signed this thing during training camp, without a chance to prove his body could hold up anywhere other than the practice court. No high-intensity game action. The very preseason leading up to the extension, he missed due to another right ankle sprain. Granted, it was the only preseason, so the team naturally played it extra safe, but the season that led to that point, Steph missed well over half the season, 44 out of 66 games out. This comes after a sophomore season brimming with ankle sprain after ankle sprain after ankle sprain, all on the same right ankle, and it got to a point where you held your breath every time he took a step, every move he made. Eventually we were expecting another tweak basically every other week, and when it went down, as frustrating as it was to see this young dude with a promising future get that future snatched out of his own control, growing further and further out of reach. Despite that disappointment, each new sprain almost felt compelled to say, well shit, it's about time. Now here's the thing, Steph was healthy for essentially his entire 3-year college career and his first year in the league. An astonishing 4-season stretch when you look at it in contrast to the 2 consecutive years of doom that came right after. But if Steph has ever had an Achilles heel, it'd be that ankle. Even during this 4-year stretch, Steph did miss some time, not a significant amount at all, but how telling is it that the only game Steph ever sat out during his Davidson days came after a rolled ankle against Furman on February 14th, 2009. But let's fast forward through that 4-year stretch, past the 2 worst, most hopeless and dire seasons of Steph's career, past the 5 tweaks in 2011, past the surgeries, past the post-surgery issues. Let's bounce back to 2012. You see now how much of a steal that contract ended up being? Last season, Steph was the 85th highest paid player in the league. This offseason, he signed what was the richest deal in American sports history. Up until Harden overtook that, nobody in sports had gotten a $200 million deal for 5 years or less. We talked about the 2013 playoffs. It was his first breakout season because, see, Steph had 2 breakout years. 2013, he became a star. 2015, he became a superstar. But even that duly gratifying 2012-13 season still wasn't perfect. Even though Steph more than legitimized the deal on Golden State's behalf, first, there was that aforementioned sprain during preseason, but it was minor. Then, he tweaks it again January 17th, out a few days, barely back when he suffered his second sprain in less than 2 weeks on the 28th. Misses another week of basketball. Just 2 months later, another sprain, leaves the game, but returns the very next matchup from an injury that, in my eyes, should have left him out at least a week, maybe even season ending, considering there were only 10 games left. And we'll get back to the significance of that decision shortly. But are you getting the trend here yet? Breakout year or not, it was far from flawless. Even that postseason where the Splash Brothers first emerged as truly the best backcourt in the league wasn't perfect. Steph suffered an injury in both rounds that he played in, but again, didn't miss any time. Now what's important here is to understand the pattern. One sprain leads to another sprain, leads to another. You see that here? You see that in the season prior, where he tweaked it again January 4th, again missing time 2 weeks out. Not but 2 months later, March, another sprain. Misses the final 28 games of the season. With every sprain, risk of re-sprain becomes higher and higher. This sentiment was echoed by Dr. Richard Ferkel, the surgeon who performed Steph's second procedure in 2012. Dr. Ferkel, in regards to Steph himself, warned that even mild sprains can come back to haunt a player months later, even years later, as they often cause collateral damage to the surrounding ligaments and cartilage, which weaken with each sprain. And again, we see this in Steph's injury history. He'll have a relatively long stretch of perfect health, almost a full year. All of a sudden, he'll come down wrong. One sprain dominoes to 2, 3, even 4 within a couple months, and the gap between incidents closes little by little while the severity of the injuries becomes greater. Now, ankle sprains are all but uncommon in the NBA. That's not the problem. These account for 15% of all injuries suffered, more than double the frequency of any other injuries. Also, unlike other common injuries, if an ankle ligament tears, it can heal, while most other tears do not. The bad news is that because they can heal on their own, ankle surgery is the very last resort. When you reach that point, there's call for concern. In Steph's case, when you've reached that point twice, you know there is a serious issue. Steph underwent a rare surgical procedure in 2011 where his ligaments that had grown loose and weak after a 5-sprain season were sewn together in order to restore stability. Now I know what y'all are thinking right now. Wait, hold up, Clay, back up, that can't be right. He had ankle stabilization surgery the offseason prior to the worst season of his career, where he played just 26 games, where he missed the last month and a half of the season? Yup, that's exactly right. So then Curry undergoes ankle surgery V2. This time around, it's to clear out loose debris and scar tissue. Now, the surgeries were an attempt to regain stability and strengthen the ankle, but they cannot completely undo all the stress sustained over the years. So, albeit slowing significantly after the final surgery, the injuries kept coming, and he kept weakening with each tweak, kept leading to further complications. Again, take note of the pattern here. Not only does the chance of retweaking increase, the circumstances surrounding the injury grow stranger. Over time, a lack of support causes players to begin tweaking their ankle almost at random, with little to no impact, or speed, or movement. They begin to occur more frequently on off days, during practice, during workouts, even performing minimal athletic activities at home, while jogging, even while just strolling down the street. Steph had those 4 years of practically absolute health, 2 injury-ridden seasons with 2 complementary off-seasons of surgery and rehab, but the initial 4-year stretch gave hope for the current stretch of health, spanning 5 seasons with only 4 missed games. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that all ended a couple months ago when Steph suffered a semi-serious ankle sprain against New Orleans, the 15th sprain of his career, and this ended a long span of perfect ankle health dating back to the first round of the 2016 playoffs, where after missing games 2 and 3 of that series, he didn't miss a single game due to any ankle injury up until this very moment a year and a half later. We all know what happened there. It's still fresh in our minds. Steph is out 26 days before his return. Credit is due to the organization for giving him a sizable amount of rest. As I've alluded to throughout this video though, that hasn't always been the case. The mentality has often been to rush him back, play him through it, in crucial playoff moments especially. The only reason this mentality's changed is that now they have KD. They don't need him in the regular season to make the playoffs or even be a top seed. This has become a potential dynasty, and potential is basically meaningless here. It's just a more acceptable way to put it, even though it's almost absolutely certain at this point. We all know it is. A team of this caliber will become a dynasty. How likely is it that any of the Hamptons 4, that's minus Iguodala, would not continue with this team? Could the downfall of this team be Klay Thompson running off to LA? Realistically, no. It's his hometown. It'd be nice to live there. Is it nice enough to walk out on multiple championships for? Nice enough to walk out a cemented legacy as one of the Splash Brothers on our historical team? I mean, it's a fucking 5 to 6 hour drive from Oracle Arena to the Staples Center. It's not like he plays for the Pistons. He's literally right there. He can hop on a plane, be there in a little over an hour. Are you telling me these players aren't accustomed to travel? That shit is nothing in contrast. It's half a nap and the flight's over. He probably wishes it was longer just so he could get a good rest. Now, the only realistic scenario where this dynasty is stopped short is a severe injury or recurring injury to one of those four. And Steph is the only realistic victim. Klay is one of the most durable stars in the league. Draymond has never had a serious injury in his career, and Durant's only really had one. Steph's had these recurring ankle injuries for years. He's had close to 20 sprains in total, 2 surgeries. The fact of the matter is that his right ankle will always be fragile after everything it's been through. Steph likes to change direction when he's got the ball in his hands. Go one way, hezzy, go the other. He loves to cross one way, trick the defender, and go behind the back the other way. Hop into a three-pointer. He needs hardly any time, hardly any space to release, so he goes to these types of moves often. He's cutting off the ball, running off elevator door screens, always changing direction. Footwork is key to his game. It's very possible it could spiral out of control again at some point, force him to have his 3rd surgery. Following his injury-ridden postseason in 2016, many were speculating that he'd have it then. It doesn't even have to be a career-ending or career-altering Grant Hill situation. If he simply goes down at the wrong time in the playoffs again, like he has many times before, that'd give the slight edge to a team like Houston or Boston. Maybe all they need to beat them in a 7-game series. Houston is currently above Golden State in the loss column. 1 less win, 1 less loss. Boston, we forget, is doing what they're doing with their 2nd best player having played a fraction of a game the entire season. Golden State knows this. They could care less about the regular season. The 73 wins were taxing enough. Probably the reason Steph couldn't hold up throughout that postseason. Why'd they rush him back? Why'd he play through? They didn't have Durant. They weren't gonna hold their heads above water without him. But did it really help to play him? Was it worth the massive potential consequences? I mean, they still lost. He wasn't healthy. He could hardly contribute. That wasn't Steph Curry you saw in the 2016 finals. People still call it a choke job. He was injured. Sprains weaken the ligaments. You know what else does? Playing on an injured ankle. As Dr. Ferkel warned, the repercussions could come back years later, hardly instantaneous. Let's talk about those playoffs. I have a theory I can't keep in. First of all, let's talk about the first injury in Game 1. I mean, did y'all see that shit? That shit was not provoked. Westbrook didn't fall on him. It wasn't a freak accident. It just happened. That's the first thing to note. Then we got the fact that despite clearly struggling with it, he returned, tried to finish out the game, couldn't obviously, and simply put more stress on that ailing ankle for no reason. You understand the Steph perspective. It's the first game of the postseason. He needs to be out there competing, but the coaching staff needs to tell him firmly that he can't, to look at the big picture. Not only the rest of the playoffs, being healthy to compete down the road in the finals, but even the big picture, staying healthy years later into his career. Now, this specific game is not the real culprit. He was only out there for a short while, but then he sits 2 games, returns for Game 4, slips, catches himself with that right foot again, his knee buckles, and you got a sprained MCL. Here's Dr. Elliot Yu, a specialist in rehabilitation, on the possibility that the ankle sprain led to, or at least heightened the chances of, this follow-up injury. Our bodies are built to move as a chain reaction. When you have an injury to one part, it can cause the remainder of that limb to move unnaturally to compensate. Now, to not take it out of context, Dr. Yu simply addresses the possibility of it. And again, I'm not a doctor, but that's my theory. I think that even after 2 games of rest, Steph was less than 100%. Not to say that the MCL injury was purely a result of the ailing ankle, but that it made it more likely that if he did slip, if he did fall wrong, his leg wouldn't be as stable and he'd be more susceptible to injuries in that area. So he's out 2 weeks, and keep in mind that rehab time varies depending on a number of factors, but ideally, you'd want to have given him double the amount of rest that he got here. But he came back for Game 4 the next round, and they needed him. Blazers had just taken Game 3 with a chance to tie the series at home. When Steph first entered the game, Golden State was down 16-2. He dropped 40 points, a near triple-double with 8 rebounds and 9 assists, put up the most points in overtime ever with 17, topping both regular season and postseason records. One of his most legendary, most iconic performances, pulled up, hit a dagger 3, turned, took his mouthguard out, shimmied, and yelled, "I'm back." So yeah, they needed a little bit of the chef's special sauce in that game, but the postseason went on. Steph jumped into the crowd after a loose ball, landed on his elbow. He was banged up all around, ankle, elbow, knee, pushing through, and by the time they hit the finals, his body was exhausted, and he was a shell of himself. That was a heavy postseason on his body, and it could have detrimental effects in the future towards the end of his career. 2017, KD went down. The Warriors could give him the full amount of rest he needed because they had enough to pull through without him. 2012, when Steph missed the final 28 games of the year, they didn't need to push him back early. They traded Monte Ellis for an injured Bogut that month. They weren't going to make any noise that season. They were perfectly content with 2 core pieces out, tanking the rest of the way for the draft pick that ended up being Harrison Barnes. A draft pick that was top 7 protected, and ended up as the top 7 pick. Had Steph been healthy, they wouldn't have even had a lottery selection in that draft. But then 2013 rolls around. Steph is having a phenomenal breakout season. The Warriors are firmly locked into the playoffs. As I said, he injured that ankle twice in less than 2 weeks. Then again a few weeks later towards the end of the season, but this time they're playing for something. They have playoff seeding to worry about. They don't sit him out a single game, and his less than perfect health definitely shows through. Over the next week, he's not himself, shoots a combined 14 of 42 from the field, and again, follow the trend. 3 injuries sustained within a short amount of time on the same ankle. Then a left ankle sprain against the Nuggets, which he of course plays through. Steph, Clay, Draymond, the Warriors were enjoying their first taste of postseason action in their career, and they were killing it. They weren't about to let anything short of catastrophic get in the way. And this leads to a second left ankle sprain next round, which again doesn't result in any missed time. But Steph's always had issues with his right ankle. Is it a coincidence that the one time he sprains the left, he re-sprains the same one a week later? And so we see Steph's health hasn't always been handled properly throughout his career. He's forced it, played through on countless occasions. He hasn't always had it braced up when he should, and again, as Dr. Ferkel warns, we don't know what kind of repercussions this may have in the future. This season, after missing those 11 games throughout December, the pattern showed once again. He re-sprains it again just 10 days after returning during shoot-around, calls it a freak accident, but was it? Or was it not what we've seen in the past and what we know about ankle ligaments? How weak they become after a sprain and how easily they can be re-sprained with little to no movement or activity to provoke it. Direct quote from Steph after the injury: "It was a drill I've done almost my whole career. It just happened to be right after I come off an injury, I do it again." Sounds like he's describing word for word exactly what we've been talking about here. Regular action he's used to doing, been doing for years with no problems. Now all of a sudden, right after returning from injury, this routine drill causes another one. He misses 2 games. A month later, he appears to tweak the same ankle again against the Spurs. This adds up to nearly 20 total sprains in his career, nearly all of which on that same right ankle, his one and only Achilles heel. And the one and only realistic scenario that could lead to a shortened dynasty, that could lead to missed championship opportunities with the wrong sprain at the wrong time. We look back at Grant Hill again, a completely different situation, with 5 surgeries and an MRSA infection that nearly cost him his life. But when Grant Hill speaks on his career and what caused its downfall, he always points to the mishandling of his injuries, playing through at times he should have been resting, causing more and more stress to an already ailing ankle, and he was never the same player again. Now the good news is, the Warriors now have a second superstar that can carry the load now, and will likely never see them force him back early, barring an injury to both at the same time, or an injury at a very critical point in the playoffs. But how detrimental have the previous mistakes already been to his career, and how worried should we be? For that, I don't have the answers. It'll all show with time. Alright, I hope y'all enjoyed the video. Be sure to leave it a like, subscribe if you're new, turn on post notifications for the next ones. You can find me on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at Clay Allen TV. I'm going to be posting on my Instagram a lot more lately. Just started it up, so go ahead and follow me there. And as always, leave your thoughts, feelings, perspectives in the comment section down below. Clay Allen, stay ballin', and I'm signing off. Peace.